So today we're diving into a story that, honestly, it sounds like something straight out of a geopolitical thriller. We're talking about a secret deal, men deported to a country they've literally never known, and a huge legal battle that asks some really fundamental questions about justice and human rights.
Just imagine this for a second. You've lived somewhere for decades, maybe most of your life. You serve a prison sentence, you get out, and you figure you're being sent back to the country you were born in. But instead, you're put on a plane, flown to a totally different continent, to a nation you have absolutely zero connection with. Well, for a handful of men deported from the US, this wasn't a hypothetical. It was their shocking new reality.
Okay, so to really get this, let's look at one man's story, Orville Etoria. He comes to the US way back in 1976, as a kid. Years later, he's convicted of a crime and ends up serving 24 years in prison. He gets out on parole in 2021. He was doing everything right, checking in with immigration, even got a Jamaican passport because they asked him to. He was all set to be sent back to Jamaica. But then, on July 16, 2025, almost 50 years after he first got to America, the rug was pulled out from under him. He was deported.
But here's the twist. He wasn't sent to Jamaica. He landed in Eswatini, a small kingdom in southern Africa, and was immediately thrown into a maximum security prison. So that's the big question, right? The mystery we're unpacking here. Why on earth was a Jamaican man who'd already served his time secretly shipped off to a prison in Africa?
Well, the answer, it turns out, is buried in this really secretive and, frankly, super controversial U.S. government policy. You see, Etoria's situation wasn't some bizarre mistake. It was the plan all along, part of something called the Third Country Deportation Program.
It's a pretty wild concept, but here's how it works. Let's say someone has a final deportation order, but their home country, for whatever reason, won't take them back. Under this program, the U.S. government can find another nation, a third country, that's willing to take them instead. And, well, the small Kingdom of Eswatini agreed to be one of those partners.
And, this wasn't just some friendly agreement. There was money involved, a lot of it. The United States gave Eswatini $5.1 million in aid, and in return, the kingdom agreed to take in as many as 160 people being deported from the U.S.
So you can imagine this set up a huge clash in how people talked about this program. The U.S. administration's side of the story was that it was a necessary tool to remove, in their words, heinous criminals and depraved monsters. But human rights groups saw it completely differently. They called it an illegal form of banishment, arguing it just throws people into a legal black hole and completely violates international law.
So let's talk about where they were sending these guys. Because the choice of Eswatini, well, that's a whole other part of this story. It wasn't a random pick, and it immediately sent up massive red flags for rights groups all over the world.
You see, Eswatini is Africa's very last absolute monarchy. It's run by King Mswati III. Political parties are basically banned, and it has a really troubling human rights record, including violent crackdowns on anyone pushing for democracy. And this is the country the U.S. decided to partner with.
And when the deportees landed, they weren't treated like immigrants. They were treated like criminals all over again. They were immediately taken to a maximum security prison and held in what lawyers are calling indefinite, arbitrary detention. And this is the part that's just mind-boggling. These guys had already done their time in the U.S. They weren't facing any new charges in Eswatini, but there they were, locked up again.
And this wasn't just about one guy. Orville Etoria was just the first. Let's take a look at the other people who got caught in the middle of this, because his story is just the tip of the iceberg.
That first flight back in July of 2025 was carrying 5 men from all over the world: Jamaica, Yemen, Cuba, Vietnam, Laos. Talk about diverse backgrounds. And the crazy part? By late October 2025, only Etoria had actually made it to his real home country. The rest, still locked up in Eswatini.
And it didn't stop there. Another flight went out in October with 10 more men, and you can see the net was cast even wider, guys from places like Cambodia and Chad. It really shows how this program was being used as a kind of catch-all for all sorts of complicated diplomatic situations.
Can you even imagine the desperation of being stuck in a situation like that? It's immense. Look at the case of Roberto Mosquera, a Cuban man who'd been in Miami since he was a kid. He felt so hopeless about being stuck in this legal limbo that on October 15, 2025, he started a hunger strike to protest.
His lawyer back in the U.S., Alma David, put it in the starkest terms possible. She said she wasn't just fighting for his freedom anymore, she was literally fighting for his life. So Mosquera's protest, it really just lays bare this impossible loop they're all stuck in. First, you're locked up with no charges after you've already served a sentence. Then, you protest with the only tool you have left, your own body. And what happens? The authorities block your lawyers from even seeing you. It's a vicious, vicious cycle.
Okay, so as you can imagine, something this extreme didn't just happen in a vacuum. The secrecy of the whole deal and the way these men were being treated, it sparked a huge international outcry and kicked off a bunch of really urgent legal fights.
So lawyers, both in the US and in Eswatini, started to fight back hard. Their argument is pretty straightforward. This is illegal. It's unconstitutional. They're saying this new imprisonment is basically a second punishment, and there's no legal reason for it. And maybe most importantly, by blocking access to lawyers, the authorities are violating one of the most basic rights there is, the right to due process.
Just listen to what Mia Unger, the lawyer who finally got Orville Evitoria out, had to say. She called his 2 months in that prison a grave injustice, and she pointed out that it wasn't just a mistake, it was an intentional effort to keep him cut off from any legal help. That really captures the outrage from the whole legal community.
And here's the bottom line. The really tough pill to swallow. For all that fighting, the results have been, well, almost non-existent. By late October 2025, a total of 15 men have been sent to Eswatini. Only one, Orville Evitoria, had actually made it home. The other 14 are still stuck there. So all of this leads to the big picture question. What happens now? Where does this whole controversial program go from here? Because the fight over its future is happening right now.
And you've basically got two sides digging in for a fight. On one side, you have the U.S. administration, which seems ready to keep this program going, maybe even expand it, as a way to carry out mass deportations. And on the other side, you've got this coalition of lawyers and human rights advocates who are determined to challenge every single transfer in court, to free the men who are already there, and to shut this thing down for good.
And that's what this all boils down to, really. It leaves us with a huge question. Is this just a new, practical tool for immigration policy in a really complicated world? Or is this a massive violation of human rights that sets an incredibly dangerous precedent, one that could lead to banishing people to legal black sites all over the planet? The answer won't just decide what happens to the men sitting in that prison cell in Eswatini. It could completely change the future of deportation policy for years to come.